We're here with Rear Admiral James A. Symonds, and I'd like to thank you for being able to meet with us and sign We the People. And as you well know, we choose these people, and we're honored to have him sign it. And then after he signed it, he's going to talk about who he is and what he did. Would you please sign?
Thank you, Richard. I'm Rear Admiral Jim Symonds, and I just completed 35 years of active Navy service last year, and we've retired here to Arizona. And so I've been asked to give you a little bit of how my career unfolded and how it went. Started in 1975. I went to Officer Candidate School. The second summer, I went to a two-summer Officer Candidate School of 16 weeks, and I was commissioned in September of 1975 at Aviation Officer Candidate School in Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida. Thereafter, the next year, I got my wings as a bombardier navigator, a naval flight officer, and then went on to NAS Naval Air Station, Whidbey Island, Washington, where I was trained to fly in the right seat of an A6 intruder. And that's run the radar system and the bombing system of that old beast of an airplane, the A6 intruder, which was a big bomb carrier in Vietnam and spanned all the way from Vietnam through the Cold War and throughout Desert Storm as well. I was retired in the mid-90s. And so my first tour, my wife and I went off to Japan, and my first tour was in Attack Squadron 115 on the USS Midway, which is now a museum in San Diego, California. And at that time it was stationed, it was home-ported in Yokosuka, Japan, and so we lived out there for 2.5 years with our one young son. And I got to fly around the Western Pacific and the Indian Ocean in the right seat of the A6. Got about 1,000 hours and 300 landings on the USS Midway. Made a couple of trips to the Indian Ocean. In fact, our first one in 1977. We went out there for 3 months when we were still in Iran, when the Air Force was there, and we were friends with Iran, and we did exercises. And that's when the Indian Ocean at that point was way out in the middle of nowhere. The supply logistics chain to get to the Indian Ocean was quite long, not like it is today. Our letters back home would take 2 or 3 weeks to get there and 2 or 3 weeks to get back. We'd run out of vegetables and we'd run out of apples and those kind of things. Not the kind of thing we see today in the Indian Ocean, where the supply chain and the logistics to get there is quite good. We made another trip to the Indian Ocean in 1979, and in fact, we were on station in the Indian Ocean when the hostages were taken in Tehran. Quite different in Iran at that time, and so we stayed on station throughout, right to at the end of my tour. Spent Christmas out there, and then as Midway was leaving station there, I left the ship and came back home to the United States. Went back to Whidbey Island, Washington, where I was an instructor as a bombardier navigator, and at that time was selected to go back to pilot training. And so we in the family now, 2 kids, went to Pensacola, Florida. We had a third child while we were there in Pensacola, and I was going through flight training for the next 2 years in 82 and 83. Switched wings, became a pilot, got my pilot's wings in August of 1983, and reported back to Naval Air Station Whidbey Island, and there we were for the next 11 years. My first pilot tour was on USS Constellation in VA Attack Squadron 196. And I was in that squadron for 39 months and made 2 deployments on the USS Constellation in 1985 and 1987. Again, back to the Indian Ocean, where a lot of us in naval aviation on the West Coast especially spent a lot of time during the 80s. In 1985 on USS Constellation, we were there when the SEAL was murdered by a terrorist on a TWA flight, and we went running up to the northwest to the Gulf of Oman, waiting to see if something was going to happen. In 1987, we were in the middle of the Indian Ocean when we reflagged the Kuwaiti tankers, and that entailed a lot of escort duty, and so we went up there and flew missions over the top of those ships that were going through the Straits of Hormuz and protecting them. So it seemed like every time I went to the Indian Ocean, something else would happen. After one more shore duty at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island, back at our fleet training squadron, I went back to the same squadron, back on the same ship, USS Constellation, And then after that, we switched to the USS Independence. The USS Independence had come around from the East Coast and made one West Coast deployment, and this was in the summer of 1990. And so back on station in the Indian Ocean one more time, when, again, at this point, at the end of the decade of the 80s, the Iran-Iraq war was over, and things were really sort of quieting down there. It looked as though, finally, instead of spending 2 or 3 months on station in the North Arabian Sea, it looked like we were going to be able to spend maybe just a couple of weeks, a touch and go, we called it, and then come back home. And, of course, on August 4th, that all changed because Iraq invaded Kuwait. So one run up there one more time on another ship, and ended up in the North Arabian Sea in the Gulf of Oman for another 4 months during Operation Desert Shield. USS Independence was sent home before the war started because it needed to get reworked and ready to go out to replace the USS Midway, my old ship, in Japan. So Midway came down, and along with all the other ships on both sides of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, fought the war in Desert Storm, while the USS Independence, we all went home and watched it on CNN with everybody else. Following that tour, I was selected to command a small weapons school at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. This was a lot of ordnance folks who were teaching other ordnance folks how to load bombs and different procedures and like that. And those of us on the officer side would do tactics classes, and for entire squadrons at a time. It would be tactics classes, and then we'd have some flying procedures to go through. It was an entire 2 to 3 week schedule, I think, that we had for the different squadrons that came through. It was called Medium Attack Weapons School Pacific, and so I commanded that. And while I was there, I was selected to command a squadron, one of the A6 squadrons at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island, VA 165, Attack Squadron 165. I joined that squadron in late 92, in October of 92, and we deployed on the USS Nimitz in 1993 out of San Diego. We, from the Air Wing, of course, all flew aboard the Nimitz and went across. And this time we were up in the Persian Gulf supporting Operation Southern Watch, which after Desert Storm for some number of years, we flew over the southern areas of Iraq and then also the northern areas of Iraq as well. And we were protecting folks on the ground to make sure that the Iraqi Air Force was staying on the ground. So that was a 6-month deployment in which we spent about 3 months in the Persian Gulf. Came back from that, I took command of the squadron, and for the next year, between late 93 and 94, I was in command of the squadron. And we didn't deploy during that time. We had, it was kind of our inter-deployment down cycle. And then, and so at the end of 94, when I left command, we went to Italy for 1 year on the U.S. 6th Fleet staff, where I was the air operations officer. Great time in Italy, our second time overseas, and great for the kids. In fact, we had one child who was going to boarding school up in London, another child with us, and we left our oldest at home, and so kind of scattered around there for a while.